Well, a happy Women's Month to all the hardworking, beautiful, overcoming, strong women out there. Welcome to yet another exciting edition of your favorite program, Media Monitor. I am Alicia Jali, ready to bring you sound analysis of some of the news that were making headlines throughout this week. Here's what we will be unpacking in the next hour. SAA has asked for a 13 billion rand cash injection. How exactly will Treasury be funding the airline this time around? We ask how the looming retrenchments will impact on the already strained economy. Have all the issues been resolved at the Klipsruit West Secondary School, or will we see an increase in racial tensions? And later we get to cross live to Nairobi to check on the upcoming elections, and finally have a quick preview on the very much anticipated motion of no confidence that takes place next week Tuesday. But first, as always, it's 9 a.m. Time to take a look at the news that are making headlines this hour.
Go!
Are you beating me up?
Are you
gonna hit me? Are you gonna hit me? Are you gonna hit me? I'm woman! Are you gonna?
The Ahmed Kathrada Foundation has expressed deep disgust at the reported attack on a black couple by 6 white men at a KFC drive-thru in Pretoria. A video has surfaced on social media of a group of men attacking the couple. The couple had allegedly asked the men to move forward in the drive-thru queue and were then attacked. But 4 of the 6 men have since been arrested. And Ahmed Kathrada Foundation Director Nishan Bolton says there can't be no justification for their vile racism and aggression. Bolton says this group had also no qualms about beating up a woman. South Africa and Zambia can learn and help each other with regard to improving their economies. This was the sentiment shared by both President Jacob Zuma and his Zambian counterpart Edgar Lungu. President Zuma is on a working visit to Zambia, and the two leaders, joined by former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, also discussed the political situation in Zambia. Currently, the country is under the state of emergency, with the opposition leader languishing in jail. And in your great sporting news, South African long jumper Luvo Manyonga said he was over the moon after winning the World Championship long jump title. The 25-year-old leaped a best of 8 meters, 48, to claim gold. Manyonga made up for the disappointment of missing out on an Olympic gold out in Rio last year, as he lost out by just 1 centimeter. And more good news is that Rushal Samai claimed bronze in the very same event. Meanwhile, the 100-meter title went to American Justin Gatlin and not Usain Bolt as expected. His time of 9.92 seconds claimed gold, while Bolt only managed bronze in a final that definitely did not go according to his script. All right, let's welcome our guest today. We're very pleased to welcome for the digital segment, SABC digital producer, Ms. Bukhule Putini. Bukhule, good morning.
Good morning, Alicia.
All right, I'm very well, thank you. And of course, on the main desk, we do have political analyst, Ms. Lebohang Peko, media specialist, Ms. Paula Frey, and media analyst, Mr. Tebogo Ditsejo, joining the ladies. Ladies and gentlemen, looking oh so gorgeous this morning. Thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, Bukhule, take it away. I can only imagine what the biggest trending story of this week was, but I'll let you do the honors.
No, Alicia, the one top hashtag this week has to be the KFC assault. Yeah. People were very disturbed, especially when the video of the 6 men attacking this couple went viral on social media. People were disturbed about the fact that they had their kids in the car as well. And the DA and the Kathrada Foundation has condemned this and saying that they are disgusted by this report of a racial attack.
What are the tweets saying?
The tweets, Siho at Siho L2 says, like, I'm still shocked to the core of my being. It's not right. These idiots are bringing racial division in the country.
Let's look at more tweets there. Ngolosi Jali says, KFC assault, where are the @RDA MPs to condemn this act. Bagupi, they are so quick to talk about corruption. Why not racism and assault? More tweets, Bukola?
Now, Ulebuheng Beruza says, our people never learn. They will be marching with them next week after such a beating and humiliation. Now, the next hashtag that trended this week was the
Wait,
no confidence.
before we go to the next big hashtag, Bukula, I want to find out from my guests what they thought about this development with the video. I do know that we're going to talk about it in more detail. Deboho, what did you make of these developments of that video?
Well, firstly, I think it's important for viewers to understand that the racial issues in South Africa are a ticking time bomb. If we do not address them, not only arrest them, but uproot them from the root causes, we're going to have serious problems in our country, of which I don't want to even go into the kind of bloodshed that this can lead to. Now, it goes beyond animosity. This is racial hatred. It's racial discrimination. We have structural racism where black people are excluded from the economy, and you have situations of white supremacy that are not being tackled. And so you can just imagine the terror that the woman who was recording the video felt, having 6 white males attacking her husband and then attacking her too, pulling out a gun and beating him to a pulp just because he asked the person to move up in KFC, to move up a little bit. And so I think in our country, we need to look at how we're going to uproot racism in its entirety.
Ladies, I want to hear from you. Paula, what did you make of this? I mean, in particular to the women being beaten up by 6 men. Aren't we celebrating Women's Month? Doesn't that even count?
I mean, I think it also speaks to the fact that every August it's Women's Month, and suddenly women's issues come to the fore, when really we should be tackling these issues
every day.
across the year, every single day. I think that, and the issue also is I mean, it's critical that we bring up the fact that these men had no qualms about beating a woman, but these men had no qualms about beating anyone.
Yeah.
And the level of violence is something I think that we need to be tackling.
I think that we need to sort of get away from the banality of how we are framing our race discourses in this country. We're talking increasingly around, and we're looking at symptoms, so we get excited about Spurman, we get excited about Penny Sparrow, now we've got KFC Man. And we know we're not going into the issues of structural racism, structural and institutional racism. We're not going into the post-colonial question. We're not going into the notion that we live in a country that, although it is an African majority country, has a white minority discourse, hegemonic imaginations, and those are what really are governing these sorts of actions. And I think when we talk about race hatred, we're somewhat missing the point entirely. We're missing the point that we have failed in terms of converting this into a post-colonial state.
And you mentioned this last week,
into a truly independent state. So these banalities, which as tragic and as unfortunate and as disgusting as they are, the discourse needs to move into structural issues in a much more profound way.
Absolutely. Bukula, let's go to the next big hashtag of this week. It's a very disturbing video indeed.
It is
that.
indeed. The next big hashtag is the hashtag no confidence. Now, as you know, that the SACP has come out to say they will vote to keep President Zuma in power in the no confidence vote on Tuesday. So now,
that's weird saying, Bukula.
So there are mixed views amongst social media.
I want to hear them.
Social media users. Some are anticipating what will be the outcomes of the vote. So Sangla says, in the vote on Tuesdays, much anticipated motion of no confidence in President Zuma. And then I am Silo says, the motion of no confidence will not succeed. Msholuzi fought for 1 term and 2nd term, now technical fighting 3rd term.
Last one.
The last one.
From, who's that? Gamoroja.
Yeah.
He says, I cannot beg NC MPs to vote against the motion of no confidence. It's their obligation to do so and always must be.
Now, Digital News Online, SABC News Online, has been playing around the topic during the week.
Yeah.
And we posted a poll asking Twitter users to whom should Parliament be accountable. So 13% said their party, 15% said the constituency, 63% said the constitution, and 9% said their conscience.
Very interesting. Leboha, what do you make of those very different dimensions of who the people actually think should hold power over Parliament?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think right now we're facing a fascinating dilemma, which is a democratic one, how we put it to the test, and really how resilient our democracy is. I think that it's also the opportunity for us to think about the ways in which we're able to engage with forms of power, multiple voices and multiple, diverse opinions and perspectives. And I think we should be excited. I mean, some of these conversations, they become silly Twitter memes, but we should actually be quite excited that there's a level of engagement that is actually taking place.
Yeah, we're going to discuss that later on before we wrap the show. Let's wrap up this segment. Bukule, what do you have for us to wrap up the digital segment
now,
this
Alicia,
week?
on a lighter note,
yeah.
Bonang Mateba.
The book!
Bonang Mateba
Tell us all about
launched a new book called A to B. Now, a lot of people came out disappointed.
What is
in
this
the
I'm
book.
seeing here?
It's grammar, and there's a
in
lot
a
of
published
grammar
book.
in a published book. So she launched a book last week, and some of her supporters actually ordered the book before the launch. So they posted some of the pages from the book, and there were a couple of mistakes. Some went to the extent of Googling
posting
and Googling her birthday, which is on the 25th of June, but in the book it's written as the 24th. So people were confused, disappointed, because she is a media personality who has been at the top of her game. If you get what I'm saying. Yeah. So a couple of people were disappointed, and
what did they say on Twitter?
Attacked her, some defended her. Tess, the goddess, said, so what if Bonang's English is bad? There are white people whose English is worse, but black people always want to give each other grief. Hashtag A to B.
Let's take more tweets there from our viewers. Of course, Lusanda says, you are missing the point. I didn't choose to write a book, whereas B did. So she was supposed to be better than this. Too much to expect?
Yeah.
Do we have any more tweets?
So it's Tess, the goddess again, who says, so what if Bonang's English is bad? There are white people whose English is worse, but black people always want to give each other grief.
All right. Bukula, unfortunately, we've run out of time for the segment. Thank you so much for joining us. Just give our viewers that URL where they can get these news and more on our digital front.
You can get news and everything at SABC News Online and Digital News Online for the news.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a quick ad break, and after that, we'll take a look at the financially embattled national carrier, South African Airways. You don't want to miss that. It's coming up after this break.
What guides us? Is it something you can touch, hear, feel, or see? What leads us on to greater experiences? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? The advice of our elders? Or is it the actions of our people? The strength of our beliefs? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Vuyani Jarana has been announced as the new CEO at the embattled national carrier South African Airways. Making the announcement, Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba said he's confident that Jarana will turn the fortunes of the ailing airline around as it attempts its 9th turnaround strategy in just a little over a decade. Jarana inherits a massive debt and maturing loans of almost 20 billion rand over the next 5 years, as well as staff morale that is at an all-time low. Now, his appointment coincided with yet another cash injection from Treasury that would help keep the airline flying by paying salaries and debts due within weeks. In giving feedback in Parliament on the airline's performance and turnaround plans, SAA says it also listed the Public Investment Corporation as a possible funder of 6 billion rand in 2018. The PIC, which administers the GEPF money among others, was criticized by the DA, saying that pensioners stand to lose their hard-earned cash if their money were to be used for an SAA bailout. Let's find out more on this clip.
Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba says the turnaround strategy adopted in 2013 was abandoned, but that the challenges can be solved if this latest strategy is implemented aggressively. He also assured Parliament that there would be no privatization of the airline.
The turnaround strategy adopted in 2013 was just simply abandoned. And it puts us where we are now. And so we need to deal with that. I agree in principle the issue is leadership that we need to exercise as Treasury, as the board, cascading down to the EXCO and all other relevant structures. There will be no privatization of SAA. There will be no privatization of SAA. SAA is going to remain a state asset. It will be turned around. It will come right.
SAA says debt maturities have been negotiated and extended to the end of September this year. Acting CEO Musa Zwane says the executive management has agreed on 5 key elements to save costs. These include salary cuts, cancellation of routes, fuel management and freezing of posts.
One is route rationalization, which will save 900 million per annum, and that is starting right now. There are a number of routes that we will be looking at cancelling and pulling out of, and we are expecting a saving of 900 million. In terms of cost optimization, we are embarking on saving about 520 million at the end of 2017-18 by looking at a number of issues that are geared towards saving cost optimization. This looks at fuel management. It looks at not filling positions where we don't have, and we have started doing that. Another one in terms of the 5-year plan that we are involved in is fleet retiring of the 5 wide-body aircraft, and that has started. We are starting with 2. I think it's August, November, and then we will be. It's August, September, and then we will be looking at the 3 more later on. We are also doing a down-gauging of aircraft flying from Cape Town to Joburg. This will help us prevent fuel, spending money on maintenance and fuel, and that has also started in earnest, and we are looking at a saving of more than 10 million on that issue. The increases on management will not be affected going forward, especially this next financial year, and that would give us a saving going forward. And the EXCO has decided on Friday to take a 5% salary cut, and that would be effective from September of this year.
Ani Jahana was appointed as Group CEO. Jahana becomes the first permanent chief executive in over 2 years. Diabosito, SABC News.
All right. So what are your assertions of the new SAA, boss? Lebohang, let's start with you.
Well, look, I think the problem with the SAA, like a lot of the state-owned enterprises, is at the moment they're a bit of a poison chalice. So anybody who walks in there, unfortunately, should have to be very resilient and expect that their own reputation may or may not be affected by the really poor running of these enterprises. So I think that he's been very effective at Vodacom, and he's turned things around there. It just remains to be seen whether he has the political as well as the financial support and the support by the sentiment, the popular sentiment of markets, etc., to be able to execute his duties effectively, and also whether he can be assertive regarding the vagaries of the board as well, because that's also been quite problematic, is that the governance and the tensions between some of the former CEOs and acting CEOs and the board have meant that, you know, operational work was hampered.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I wish him well, because certainly the SAA deserves to be run and managed slightly better than it has been over the past few years.
Absolutely. I mean, Paula, we just heard in the insert that this is the 9th rescue strategy in the past decade. Exactly. So what would be different with this one? Do you think it has any chance to work also?
Well, I think it comes, you know, with the reputation of having turned around Vodacom's Africa business. But I agree with Lebohang. I mean, he's not only going to have to manage the organization, he's also going to have to manage his boss, the board to whom he reports. And there have been difficulties with that over the past few years. He also comes into a situation where there hasn't been a permanent appointment for the last 2 years. Yeah. There's a whole lot of uncertainty. There are a whole lot of internal, I would imagine, groupings, and all of those things, apart from the turnaround strategy, are things that he's going to have to deal with. You know, SAA is not alone in trying to create a viable, profitable business in the airline industry around the world. I mean, it's a sector that is a really difficult sector to manage and to manage profitably. And there are a lot of other requirements of SAA in terms of what it does for the country, what it means to the country. And so I think he has a bigger job. I think he has the credentials that give him a good starting point. But his biggest challenge is the political environment and the support he gets.
Dabogo, talk to us about some of the announced cost-cutting measures, like your cutting of routes. I mean, how will that impact our economic growth? I mean, we thought we were expanding as a country to have so many routes.
Well, I think if you look at their annual report, they're spot on, because the fuel cost is the highest cost that they're bearing, which is 24% of the cost. The second highest cost is employees. And so what we need to do is look at how is our staff to aircraft ratio. Now you look at, SA has 10,706 employees, and they only have a fleet of 61 aircrafts. So that's a ratio of 176 employees to 1 aircraft. Now if you look at Ethiopian Airlines, it's 104 to 1. And so that is much lower. And so you'll find that most of the airlines that have greater deficits and make greater losses are those that cannot keep it down to a lower ratio. And so they need to look at that first. And we benefited from lower fuel costs. So you'll see that in 2015-16, SA made a loss of 4.7 billion rands, and then the next year it went down to 153 million rands, which is an improvement. However, according to the Auditor General's report, they are still a going concern. And the board also reported last year that they foresee them being a going concern moving forward. And therefore, they need to look at more. You know, it is important for them to reduce the cost of salaries by 5%. I think that's a good strategy. They also had severance packages where people could be retrenched on a voluntary basis. But now they need to look at other ways in which they can reduce the amount of staff so that they can start making a profit like they did in 2010, 2011.
Look, Paula, in Parliament, the SAA Chief Financial Officer said the airline will continue its loss-making path for the unforeseeable future, with losses of, wait for it, 2.8 billion rand that is expected in 2017 and 18, and it will only start making profits by 2019.
And that's if we have a turnaround strategy.
Absolutely.
So I mean, the situation is quite dire, and he's going to have his work cut out for him from day one.
Look, Lebohang, talk to us about the fact that the DA has voiced their concerns now about PIC trying to loan the money to South African Airways to get it out of the grant.
Yeah, that's what DA will do. I mean, that's what the opposition movements will do. But I think that
Is it a just observation?
I think it, to some extent, I actually think it is on this occasion, because I think the mismanagement and the lack of oversight is extremely problematic. It's quite atrocious, really. I mean, it's been 5-10 years of this. The high turnover of competent CEOs under various, shady and murky circumstances. I mean, just now there was the whole scandal around this 1 billion rand tender that was almost awarded to what amounts to a fictitious company, a bolo, and two guys who set it up who are, I think both of them are French, and, used some fake names, rented blacks, and, were almost, awarded this $1 billion tender. And this is not the only example of such. And I think, one of the other, one of the other aviation unions has complained about, kind of misexpenditure to the amount of about 2.86 billion rand. So the level of wastage, the lack of oversight, and the lack of both political leadership and I think the encumbrance that political leadership has actually caused in terms of basically the functionality of this. Turnaround strategies are not effective without the correct leadership. And we're on our umpteenth attempt to get this right. Under other circumstances, we have to recognize that, as Paula has said, that, the SAA is an ambassadorial, has almost got any national airline, state-owned and state governed,
operated,
has to play an ambassadorial role. So the idea of then privatizing it becomes really problematic, because then it means then that it is no longer to fulfill its mandate as part of the state package, a marketing brand. But we also have to consider that it is not running effectively, and why. Heads don't seem to roll ever.
That's true. All right. Well, that's all we have time for on that topic. After the break, how will the impending mining sector job cuts further impact on the already crippled economy? We tackle that after the short break. Do stay tuned.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
And we're back. A retrenchments bloodbath is currently looming in the gold mining industry. Sibanye Gold has hinted that 7,400 jobs are on the line as it plans to restructure its loss-making Beatrix West and Cook operations. Well, last month, Anglo Gold Ashanti, the world's third biggest gold producer, said 8,500 jobs would be lost as it considered placing some of its aging domestic operations on care and maintenance. While Bokoni Platinum Mine in Limpopo also announced that last month it would retrench 2,651 employees. Let's find out more on this clip. All right, we don't have a clip for this discussion, but we are joined in studio by labor analyst Mamokgethi Molopiane. Mamokgethi, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Help us understand this. I mean, the Mineral Resources Department has withdrawn its plan to actually impose the moratorium suspending the issuance of new mining and prospecting rights. Please put this in layman's terms as I'm reading it, because I really don't understand what's going on here.
Yes, I think it comes from the pressure from the mining industry and the sector that if the minister goes ahead and impose the moratorium and withdraws the license and mining rights permission, then they will take further action. So in this case, because it's been a battle between the business side of mining and the regulator, which is the minister, this time the minister is the first one to blink. So the mining industry said, we do not want the charter. They have a hashtag, it's not our charter, and they opposed it publicly, and they said they rejected. And so in acting against that, the minister said, then I'll put a moratorium on mining rights and license. And they said, you're bluffing. They called him on his bluff. And it seems like he's the one who bluffed and he blinked.
But Mamokgethi, maybe explain to us what is wrong or right then with this proposed mining charter?
Well, the industry is saying in its current form they cannot afford to implement it. But I always argue that the mining industry cannot dictate to policymaker, to government, and to South Africa how transformation should unfold within the sector when in fact they had taken so long to transform the mining industry. I mean, when you look at the mining industry, the bulk of the low-skilled, of the low workers and the low salaries are black. Yeah. And then the middle, they have a few blacks here and there. And then at the top executive, because they are compelled and forced by legislature to transform, they have black faces. But in broader operations, particularly the operations of mining, it is perceived as South Africa's mining industry hasn't transformed. And so for them, the argument is that you are forcing us to transform, but government is saying we are because you have taken long to transform. So some of the propositions in the mining charter, for example, have about 70% black executives and have 50% women at that executive level. There's nothing wrong with it, especially when we look at that for the past 23 years, we have enough qualified blacks who can fill in that position. And also in terms of empowering communities and giving the communities the share, I think that is critical. Equally so with the ESOPs, employee share ownership schemes or programs. That is critical. So the business sector at the moment is coming off as they are against transformation.
But Mamokgethi, would you say it's this new mining charter that is proposed that has perpetuated this jobs bloodbath in the mining industry?
I do not think so, but I do think it preempted the reaction of the mining industry. Because when you look at Sibanye Gold, for example, they have been restructuring their operations. When you look at Anglo Gold Ashanti, they have been mechanizing. Some of their operations are semi-mechanized. So most of the gold mining companies, because of the aging mines, they were already restructuring how they operate and were planning retrenchments anyway. However, I do think now that the fight is about policy and mining legislature, it made the companies and the mining executive to say, if you are going to do this, then we will show you. And in turn, we will speed up the retrenchment processes. At the same time, Alicia, you have key players in the industry who do not see eye to eye. On the one hand, the business and the minister are fighting. On the other hand, Labour, through NUM, has said, this is the most terrible mining minister we've had, and he must go. So a crisis within the mining industry.
There was that whole conversation around the nationalization of mines, and that was outright rejected. But isn't this new mining charter, proposed new charter, some way to try and bridge the gap so that everybody has a piece of that pie, so to speak?
It would, but I think to bring it in relation to nationalization would be wrong. I think the current mining charter, flawed as it is trying to say to the mining industry and probably any sector in South Africa, if you cannot transform when we have given you the carrot to enable you to transform, when you've put forth incentives that allows you to transform, we will then bring in the stick to force you to transform. And there lies in the challenge. The mining industry has deep pockets. The mining industry has always been seen as the industry in South Africa. And I do think it is saying you cannot dictate to us how to run our business.
Mamokgethi, you know, you explain these things like, you know, it's just nothing. It's child's play. Thank you so much for that sound analysis. That is mining as well as labor analyst Mamokgethi Molopiane talking to us about the jobs bloodbath in the gold mining sector. Let's take a quick ad break. And after that, is there calm after weeks of protests at the Klipsruit West Secondary School, or will race continue to divide that community? It's all coming up after the short break. You don't want to miss it. Now, these past 2 weeks, we've seen racial tensions escalate at Klipsruit Secondary School out in Soweto. Parents there took to the streets, burning a bus and closing off the N12 early this week, protesting against the appointment of a black principal instead of a colored one. However, schooling is set to resume tomorrow. We're very pleased to be joined for this discussion by Gauteng Department of Education spokesperson, Mr. Steve Mabona. Sir, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for coming to Media Monitor.
Good morning.
So what is the resolution? Any headway in the discussions?
Definitely, there's an agreement that tomorrow things are back to normal. Schooling will be operating. The steering committee that we met with, they've agreed with us that they will make sure that there's calm. And on Friday already, there was some sense of that calmness. It's just that the message, came very late to the community to say there won't be any disruption. Hence, we agreed that the message must go across to say on Monday, things are back to normal. But then there are discussions that will continue. We agreed that we're going to be interacting more closely with the community. And we have referred most of the important matter, which is that one of the process that the community was complaining about, to say the process probably it was flawed. So we agreed that the minister will then have to assist us with an investigation. We will all make our presentation there, the communities, ourselves as a department, and we'll wait for that process.
What happens in the interim? The black principal is going to continue at the school?
No, remember we had deployed an official at the school to be there on an everyday basis to make sure that the schooling and it continues.
Is uninterrupted.
So he's based in that circuit. It's someone that they're accustomed to. Though he's black, they know him and he's welcome in the area. Mr.
Mabona, look, let's talk about this. I know we spoke about this issue when it first flared up, but what would you say are really, really the real issues at these schools and those schools that have affiliated themselves with this secondary school here?
Look, there's an element of economic or socio-economic development issues which are cropping up. The school, we felt that we were used in this process because people were raising issues like they are alienated economically, their unemployment is higher than anyone in the township. I don't know where those figures come from, but they are saying projects that are happening in the area, they see people coming from other areas coming to work there, like your maintenance at school, refurbishments. They say they need local people to work there because they feel alienated. And so when we interacted with them, we could have a sense that most of the steering committee members, they are the ones that were on the first one that happened on the issue of housing, to say they wanted housing, they are alienated.
That's not a school matter, Mr. Mabona.
Hence, we said a school issue. Actually, we felt used because in that community meeting, most of them were saying, no, we don't need this principal because it's black. But then others were saying, no, the procedure is in question.
Yeah.
But then we said to them, but it's your own SGB that appointed.
Absolutely.
And SGB is 90% colored. So it tells you that there's so many things that are involved. But in our discussion, we felt that, look, we need to engage more because there's other racial issues that were raised that the teachers are abusing colored learners. And we said we need to call upon South African Human Rights Commission to come in the field and investigate and assist us.
All right.
But then the issue of SGB, we need to pronounce on whether we continue to dissolve it because they were dysfunctional and it was proven that if you any SGB and you don't agree, and how is the school going to be functional?
Absolutely.
Because SGB must make sure that the school is functional.
So what did you resolve to do with that matter in pertaining to the SGB, the school's SGB?
Well, it's a matter of process because we need to be procedural in how we do it. But there's a decision that we're going to go ahead and dissolve them. So we'll then give them an opportunity to elect another SGB, which will be new.
Okay.
And they will have to take care of the other process.
And those social issues that they raised, Mr. Mabona, did you as a department then refer them to the other branches or constituencies of government to come and actually have a look at what's going on at that area?
among other things that we've agreed upon is that we need to have a plan on how we're going to change the state of education there.
Yeah.
Because there's low performance when we look at the academia in the area. So we felt that we need to have a plan, you know, improve the performance. And among other things, we must just make sure that there's no interruption. And the MEC, Mamavulo, who was acting, undertook to interact with the Gauteng provincial government to say, let's look at all the other social, economic, factors that, were raised.
That could have led to this,
There's so many stakeholders that we then need to engage, and probably we need then to go back to the community.
When's that going to happen?
No, it will happen because it's an urgent matter. Remember, we agreed that we're going to be on a continuous basis, interact with them.
Okay.
And more so that this steering committee, there's another consent group which said they are meeting today. They also need to interact with us. And hence we've agreed with the steering committee that, look, we're not going to be interacting with you only. You need to agree that we're going to interact with other people because the Klipsruit West community are saying, the steering committee that we are interacting with, actually, they are a problem.
Okay.
So we must also interact with them and say, how do we move forward? But then we are happy that we've agreed, all of us, that no disruption of school. Let our learners and children benefit from education. Let's all not be selfish.
All right, and you'll interact with us once they've interacted with you on the ways going forward to address those social ills. Mr. Mabona, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That was Mr. Steve Mabona, the spokesperson for the Gauteng Education Department. Let's take a quick ad break. We're back with more Media Monitor shortly after that.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Let's talk continental elections now. Rwanda's incumbent leader Paul Kagame won a landslide victory in the presidential elections this past week, granting him a third term in the helm. The country went into the elections amid fears of repression and election rigging after reports emerged that Kagame had said he was certain a victory well ahead of the elections. Now, Kagame's victory extended 17 years in the highest office, and partial results of the election gave him a 98% lead of the votes, with 80% of the votes accounted for. He was challenged by Frank Habineza of the Democratic Green Party of Rwanda and an independent candidate, Philippe Mpaimana. Meanwhile, Kenyans will also be heading for the polls this coming Tuesday, and President Uhuru Kenyatta will be challenged by fierce rival and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who is representing an umbrella opposition party, the National Super Alliance. Now, this election has already been marred by the killing of senior elections official Chris Musando a few days ago. Another country expected to elect a new president this month is Angola later on in the month, and the predominantly Portuguese-speaking nation will be looking to vote in the successor to President Jose Eduardo dos Santos, who has been in office since 1979. Here's more on this insert.
This is the capital city, Nairobi, Kenya. With me, I have Saraki Mani, who's going to take us through what's likely to happen in the next 48 hours. Sarah, good morning. Can you tell us, in South Africa, the cooling period is 24 hours. before polling. But in Kenya, it's a different story. Can you elaborate?
Well, now the cooling hour or the silence hour has turned into 48 hours. This is according to Kenya's new electoral laws. This gives the Independent Elections and Boundaries Commission time to prepare for the election. It also gives Kenyans a time to just reflect and think about the choices now they have to make, because the campaign period has actually been for quite some time. It started in May. It ended yesterday at 6 p.m. And so it is a time today, being Sunday, for people to go back to church, those who need to travel up country to have enough time to travel up country and get ready to vote on Tuesday, which incidentally is also a public holiday here in the country.
When you look at what transpired since the campaign started, it has been very tense. Do you think this 48 hours does help to kind of bring the temperatures down?
Well, in essence, that is what the IEBC is trying to do. The political rhetoric has been very heavy. Each side accusing each other of this, then the other side counter accusations, moving even a notch higher with both sides of the political divide, this time accusing the judiciary of taking sides, accusing the judiciary of bias. The IEBC itself has come under very heavy criticism, especially from the opposition, that says it is not prepared, saying that it is going to rig the election. And so this time now, 48 hours, in fact, I've seen a lot of people on social media saying they're enjoying the silence already. So a good time for Kenyans to reflect.
Perhaps some going to church, divine intervention?
Divine intervention, a lot of people saying is needed at this time. In fact, we understand that President Kenyatta will be attending 2 church services today. Former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and his running mate Kalonzo Musyoka will also be attending church services. And then later in the afternoon, both of them are expected to meet the various delegations of international observers here in the country.
Tomorrow, what can we expect? What's likely to happen? Are we likely to get a briefing from the Electoral Commission in terms of state of readiness?
Yes, the Electoral Commission will be briefing the media and, of course, Kenyans on the state of readiness. But that starts today, because one of the things that the international observers noted is that the IEBC has been keeping quiet for too long, and that has raised suspicions among some Kenyans saying, what are you hiding? So they decided to have regular updates. We expect that they're going to be having one. Indeed, the IEBC itself is having prayers today, and then after the prayers, they will have an update. Then tomorrow, we expect them to start distributing poll materials and also, helping to get everything set ahead of elections on Tuesday.
Let's talk about security. It is indeed a concern. Do you think behind the scenes there is hard work to ensure that all goes well?
Well, in an interview we had with the permanent secretary, the principal secretary in charge of interior security, Dr. Karanja Kibicho, he said security and preparations for the elections, the security work has been going on for a year. And this is because one of the things is that Kenya has learned from its past 2007 elections when 1,500 people were killed. Out of those, the police is accused of having killed 400. So they're careful that this time they're not the ones who will be blamed for killing such a large number of people, but also that they create the kind of atmosphere that is needed for elections. So we understand that 150,000 security officers have been put in place to man the polling centers and also to man the country.
The other important stakeholder, the observers, quite a heavy contingent and very high profile people leading different missions.
This is Kenya, Sophie. The middle of Africa, connecting the East African region, the gateway to the continent, as they call it, East Africa's biggest economy, the hub for humanitarian assistance going to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan. And so it is important for peace to reign during the electoral period and after, because all this work continues. Kenya is also a regional mediator for peace in South Sudan, for peace in Somalia. They have troops in Somalia, and so they're also doing a lot in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so it is seen as important that the country holds, even when everybody around them is falling apart. That is why you have former South African President Thabo Mbeki leading a heavy delegation of 90 observers from the African Union. You have former Secretary of State John Kerry leading the Carter Center, a U.S. independent observation mission. You have a former President of Ghana, John Mahama, who lost an election and stepped down willingly coming to also observe on behalf of the Commonwealth. We have the European Union, we have the East African Community. The IEBC is saying they have accredited more than 5,000 observers, the largest number they have ever done.
And finally, tomorrow, what can we expect? And then, of course, Tuesday morning.
Well, we expect that the media will continue, because now the politicians cannot talk anymore and they cannot campaign. So we expect that the media is the one that will continue, giving information. And just to talk about the media, if you notice what has happened, in Kenya, crowds are very important and people are very sensitive. So every time the main media stations are reporting, you see they try to have the balance of the crowds and to have the main candidates on the front page. One thing that the Standard we noted have done, and we expect that probably we will see it in the Daily Nation tomorrow, is that they have a page one commentary talking about the choice is yours, telling Kenyans to vote well and to choose leaders of integrity, but also to vote peacefully. So we expect that tomorrow there will be now press conferences by church leaders, the IEBC. We do not expect anything from political parties because it is their time for silence to give Kenyans a chance to vote on Tuesday.
And then Tuesday morning?
Tuesday morning, we all wake up, the 19.6 million registered of us Kenyans. We go to the ballot, and also the media will also be there. But it is an important time for Kenya decision-making. This is Kenya's second election since the enactment of the new constitution. President Kenyatta seeking a second and final term. Former Prime Minister Raila Odinga making a fourth attempt and his final term, because Odinga is 72 now, growing old, so he may not be able to run a second time.
SABC will be there, the biggest broadcaster on the continent, giving an African story or reporting on an African story from the African perspective.
Yes, and we promise to be objective. We promise to bring you the news as we see it, for you to judge for yourself who among the candidates is the best. We have done that the whole time during the electoral period. We will now be bringing you the results and the events that happen after the elections.
Thank you, Sarah. That was Sarah Kimani, our journalist based here in Nairobi, Kenya. And you can follow Sarah Kimani on social media, on Facebook or Twitter. You can also follow Aldrin St-Pierre, who will also give you updates on Twitter and Facebook. Over to you, Johannesburg.
Thank you so much to Sophie, all the way out in Nairobi, joined by East African correspondent Sarah Kimani, talking elections on Tuesday. Quick one, Lebohang.
Very quick one. So, I think the environment is very clear. We've had different levels of ethnic factionalism in terms of Kenyan politics, Luo, Kikuyu. I suspect that Kenyatta will probably get it again because he's got the power of incumbency backing him. Of course, we know that the Raila Odinga is a serial opposer. You know, he's been a serial opposer. His father was a serial opposer, in fact. He and Kenya, he was Kenyatta's vice president.
He said if it doesn't win, he's going to bow out.
Of course. Well, we've heard that before as well. I think the other thing, of course, is that's more problematic is that we're seeing the representation of family, genetically determined politics, rather than ability, capacity-related talent that needs to emerge. So I think that ultimately there is no real opposition in Kenya because these are all feudalists and people of power and great, these are elite politics that are playing themselves out in the form of different factions.
Thank you, Lebohang. Paula, a quick one from you too.
But it's going to be interesting to see what happens after the elections on Tuesday. I agree with Lebohang. I think that probably the incumbent, Kenyatta, will win. But I think also what happens afterwards is really important for democracy and the progress towards democracy in Kenya.
Absolutely. The security scare, should the election results be disputed, Tebogo, something of a concern.
Absolutely. They're already compromised with the death of Chris Msando, who was managing their IT systems. How does an electoral official die like weeks just before the election? And there's also evidence that he was tortured before he was killed. And so that is a huge concern, and it already brings the question as to whether or not these elections are going to be credible. And if it's close, what is, as my guest Lebohang has said, what are they going to do in terms of making sure that the state machinery is not being used in order to capture the elections?
All right. Well, that's where we leave it for this week. Miss Lebohang Peko, Miss Paula Frey, and Mr. Tebogo Detseho all joining me for sound analysis of the biggest newsmakers of this week. I'm back on top of the hour with more news, but Media Monitor is back on your screen next week, Sunday. Same time and place, that is right here on the SABC News channel. We're coming back right now. Don't go anywhere.